When you start a new ASP.NET application, one of the steps in the process is configuring the authentication services your application needs. This is done with a Change Authentication button that appears in the New Project dialog. The default authentication is individual user accounts, which I'll talk about in just a minute. When you click the Change button, you'll have a dialog with 4 options. The first option is No Authentication. This is when you want to build a website that doesn't care who the visitors are. It's open to anyone, and every person can access every single page. You can always change that later, but the No Authentication option means there will not be any features included to identify users coming to the website. The second option is Individual User Accounts. This is the traditional forms-based authentication, where a user can come to the website, they can register, create a login, and by default their username is stored in a SQL Server database using some new ASP.NET identity features which we'll look at. The password is also stored in the database, but it is hashed first. And since the password is hashed, you don't have to worry about plain text passwords sitting in a database. That is a very dangerous practice. This option is typically used for internet sites where you want to establish the identity of a user. And in addition to letting a user create a local login with a password for your site, you can also enable logins from third parties like Microsoft, Google, Facebook, and Twitter. This allows a user to log into your site using their live account or their Twitter account, and they can select a local username, but you don't need to store any passwords. This is the option that we'll spend some time with in this module, the Individual User Accounts option. A third option is to use organizational accounts. This is typically used for business applications where your company, and perhaps your partners too, you'll be using Active Directory Federation services. You're set up to use Office 365, you're set up with Azure Active Directory services, and you have a single sign-on for internal apps and cloud apps. You'll need to provide an app ID, so your app will need to be registered with the Windows Azure Management Portal if this is Azure-based, and the app ID will uniquely identify this application amongst all the applications that might be registered. The fourth option is Windows Authentication, which works well for intranet applications. So you are using Active Directory at the company, but nothing fancy or nothing federated. A user logs into their Windows desktop and they launch a browser to your application that sits inside the same firewall. And ASP.NET can automatically pick up the user's identity, the one that was established by Active Directory. This option does not allow any anonymous access to the site, but again, that is a configuration setting that you can change. And these are the available options for authentication. Let's drill into the forms-based authentication, the one that goes by the name now Individual User Accounts.